Everyone mocked her. Then the SEAL commander's eyes fell on her tattoo. Sarah Martinez had always been different from the other girls in her small Texas town. While they spent their weekends at the mall or painting their nails, she was at the local gym, pushing herself through grueling workouts that left her exhausted but satisfied. Her arms bore intricate tattoos that told stories of strength, survival, and honor, designs that most people in Cedar Falls didn't understand or appreciate. The morning sun cast long shadows across the military recruitment fair as Sarah adjusted her simple black t-shirt and walked through the entrance gates. She had come here not because she was looking for a career change, but because her younger brother Jake had been pestering her for weeks to accompany him. Jake was 19 and fresh out of high school, filled with dreams of serving his country and seeing the world beyond their sleepy town. "Come on, Sarah," Jake had pleaded the night before. "You don't have to sign up for anything. Just come with me for moral support. You know how nervous I get around authority figures." Sarah couldn't refuse her brother anything. After their parents died in a car accident 3 years ago, she had become more than just his sister. She was his guardian, his protector, and often his voice of reason. At 25, she worked 2 jobs to keep their small apartment and put food on the table. During the day, she waited tables at Murphy's Diner, and at night she cleaned offices downtown. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills and kept Jake in community college. The recruitment fair was buzzing with activity. Young men and women moved from booth to booth, collecting brochures and speaking with representatives from different branches of the military. Sarah noticed how the recruiters' eyes lit up when they spotted potential candidates. The athletic types, the clean-cut kids with bright smiles and eager expressions. She also noticed how those same eyes would skip right over her. Her tattoos were visible on her forearms, an intricate sleeve on her right arm depicting a phoenix rising from flames, with detailed feathers that seemed to move in the light. On her left arm, she wore a memorial piece for her parents, complete with their names and dates surrounded by roses and military ribbons. Her father had been a Marine, and her mother had been a nurse who served overseas. The tattoos were her way of carrying their memory with her always. As she walked through the crowd, Sarah could hear the whispers and see the stares. A group of girls from her high school were standing near the army booth, and one of them nudged another when she spotted Sarah. "Look, it's Tattoo Girl," whispered Jessica Palmer, who had been the head cheerleader back in school. "What's she doing here? Trying to join the circus?" The comment drew snickers from the group, and Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She had dealt with comments like this her entire adult life. People saw her tattoos and immediately made assumptions about who she was, what kind of person she must be. They saw someone who was rebellious, irresponsible, maybe even dangerous. They didn't see the woman who worked 80 hours a week to support her brother, who volunteered at the local animal shelter on weekends, or who had a degree in social work that she couldn't afford to use because the jobs didn't pay enough. Jake appeared at her side, his face flushed with excitement. "Sarah, you should see some of these opportunities. The Navy has programs for engineering, and the Air Force has technical training that could set me up for life. This is amazing." Sarah smiled at her brother's enthusiasm, pushing down her own discomfort. "That's great, Jake. Have you talked to anyone yet?" "I've been to a few booths, but I want to check out the Navy SEALs presentation. It's starting in 10 minutes over by the main stage." Jake's eyes were shining with the kind of hero worship that made Sarah's stomach clench with worry. The Navy SEALs were the elite of the elite, and Sarah knew enough about military life from her father's stories to understand that the training was brutal and the missions were dangerous. The thought of losing Jake the way she had lost her parents made her feel sick, but she also knew that trying to talk him out of his dreams would only push him away. They made their way toward the main stage, where a small crowd had gathered. Sarah found herself standing at the back of the group, trying to blend into the background. She crossed her arms over her chest, inadvertently covering some of her tattoos, but the damage was already done. Several people had already noticed her and were whispering among themselves. A woman in her 40s with perfectly styled blonde hair turned to look at Sarah and made no effort to hide her disapproval. "Honestly," she said to her husband in a voice just loud enough for Sarah to hear, "what kind of example is that setting for these young people? Coming to a military event looking like that?" Sarah's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. She had learned long ago that defending herself often only made things worse. People had made up their minds about her the moment they saw her ink, and nothing she could say would change their opinions. The crowd settled down as a man in dress blues stepped up to the microphone. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of presence that commanded attention without effort. His uniform was immaculate, every ribbon and medal perfectly placed. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly across the assembled crowd. Good morning, everyone. I'm Commander James Mitchell, and I've been a Navy SEAL for 15 years. I'm here today to talk to you about what it means to serve at the highest levels of our military. Sarah found herself listening despite her intention to zone out. Commander Mitchell spoke with passion about dedication, sacrifice, and the bonds that form between teammates who trust each other with their lives. He talked about the rigorous training that weeds out all but the most committed candidates, and the missions that require not just physical strength, but mental toughness and unwavering moral character. Being a SEAL isn't about being the biggest or the strongest, Commander Mitchell continued. It's about having the heart of a warrior and the soul of a protector. It's about being willing to lay down your life for your brothers and sisters in arms, and for the innocent people who can't protect themselves. As he spoke, his eyes scanned the crowd, making contact with individual faces. Sarah noticed how he seemed to really see each person, not just looking past them to the next face. When his gaze reached her area of the crowd, she instinctively tried to step back, but found herself blocked by the people behind her. For just a moment, Commander Mitchell's eyes met hers. She expected to see the same dismissive look she had grown accustomed to, the quick assessment and immediate dismissal. Instead, she saw something that surprised her, genuine interest, and what looked almost like recognition. But the moment passed quickly, and he continued his presentation. Sarah tried to refocus on what he was saying, but she found her mind wandering. She thought about her father, who had told her stories about the Marines he had served with, men and women from all walks of life who had found family in the military. He had always said that the best soldiers weren't necessarily the ones who looked the part, but the ones who had something worth fighting for. After the presentation ended, people began to approach Commander Mitchell with questions. Jake was among them, bouncing on his toes with nervous energy as he waited his turn. Sarah hung back, content to observe from a distance. She watched as the commander patiently answered questions, gave advice, and posed for photos with starstruck young recruits. She was about to suggest to Jake that they head to the food vendors when she overheard a conversation that made her blood boil. "Can you believe that girl with all the tattoos?" said a middle-aged man to his friend. "What is this world coming to? In my day, people like that wouldn't be caught dead at a military event." "Probably here looking for trouble," his friend replied. "You know the type. All rebellious and anti-authority. Probably has a criminal record a mile long." Sarah felt her hands clench into fists. She had dealt with ignorant comments her entire adult life, but today they seemed particularly cutting. Maybe it was the setting, surrounded by talk of honor and service, that made the judgment feel especially unfair. Before she could think better of it, she found herself walking toward the two men. "Excuse me," she said, her voice steady despite the anger coursing through her veins. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation." The men looked startled, as if they hadn't expected her to confront them. The first man, who was wearing a veteran's cap, straightened his shoulders defensively. "Look, miss," he began, "we weren't trying to cause any trouble." "No trouble at all," Sarah replied calmly. "When you look at me, what exactly do you see?" The men exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Well, the second man stammered. "You see someone who doesn't belong here, right? Someone who couldn't possibly understand what service and sacrifice mean?" Sarah's voice remained level, but there was steel underneath. "You see the tattoos and assume I'm some kind of troublemaker or criminal?" A small crowd had begun to gather around them, drawn by the tension in the air. Sarah could see Jake approaching from across the way, his face filled with concern. "Now hold on just a minute," the first man said, his face reddening. "We have every right to our opinions." "Absolutely you do," Sarah agreed. "Just like I have every right to tell you that you're wrong." She rolled up her sleeve, fully revealing the memorial tattoo on her left arm. "This tattoo honors my parents. My father was a Marine who served 2 tours in Afghanistan. My mother was a military nurse who treated wounded soldiers in field hospitals. They both died serving others. My father continued his service as a paramedic after leaving the Marines, and my mother worked in emergency rooms in underserved communities." The crowd had grown larger now, and Sarah could see that Commander Mitchell had noticed the commotion. He was making his way through the group of people, though she couldn't tell if he was coming to break up what looked like an argument, or if he was simply curious about what was happening. "These tattoos," Sarah continued, gesturing to her right arm, tell the story of overcoming trauma and rising from the ashes of tragedy. They remind me every day that strength comes from surviving what you thought would destroy you. She looked directly at the first man, who was now looking distinctly uncomfortable. I work 2 jobs to support my younger brother and put him through college. I volunteer at the animal shelter and donate blood regularly. I've never been arrested, never used drugs, and the strongest thing I drink is coffee. But sure, judge me by my appearance if that makes you feel better about yourself. The crowd around them was completely silent now. Sarah could feel dozens of eyes on her, but for once, she didn't care about the stares. She had spent too many years letting people's assumptions go unchallenged, and something about this place, this day, had finally pushed her past her breaking point. Commander Mitchell had reached the edge of the crowd and was listening intently. Sarah caught sight of him in her peripheral vision, but she was too focused on the 2 men in front of her to pay much attention to anyone else. I think maybe we should all just calm down, someone in the crowd suggested. I am calm, Sarah replied. I'm just tired of being judged by people who don't know the first thing about me. The first man seemed to have recovered some of his bluster. Well, maybe if you didn't want to be judged, you shouldn't have marked yourself up like that. Tattoos send a message whether you like it or not. You're absolutely right, Sarah agreed, surprising everyone, including herself. Tattoos do send a message. Mine send the message that I honor my family, that I've overcome hardship, and that I'm not ashamed of my story. What message does your judgment send? Before the man could answer, a new voice cut through the tension. Excuse me, folks, but I'd like to have a word with the young lady. Everyone turned to see Commander Mitchell standing just behind the crowd. His presence seemed to command immediate respect, and people automatically stepped aside to create a path between him and Sarah. Sarah felt her stomach drop. She had caused a scene at a military event, argued with veterans, and probably embarrassed Jake beyond repair. Now she was about to be dressed down by a Navy SEAL commander in front of half the town. Yes, sir, she said quietly, her earlier confidence evaporating. Commander Mitchell's expression was unreadable as he approached her. When he was close enough to speak without shouting, he stopped and looked directly at her for a long moment. Sarah braced herself for the lecture she was sure was coming. Instead, he held out his hand. Commander James Mitchell, he said, and you are, and Sarah Martinez, she replied, shaking his hand and wondering what was coming next. Martinez, would you mind if I took a closer look at your tattoos? Sarah stared at Commander Mitchell in confusion. Of all the things she had expected him to say, asking to examine her tattoos wasn't one of them. The crowd around them seemed just as surprised, and she could hear murmurs of curiosity and speculation. I'm sorry, what? She asked, certain she had misheard. Your tattoos, Commander Mitchell repeated, his voice calm and professional. I'd like to take a closer look at them, if you don't mind, specifically the one on your left arm. Sarah glanced around at the faces watching them. Some looked curious, others disapproving, and a few seemed downright hostile. She spotted Jake pushing through the crowd, his face a mixture of worry and confusion. The 2 men who had started this whole confrontation were still standing nearby, looking like they weren't sure whether to stay and watch or quietly slip away. I suppose so, Sarah said finally. Extending her left arm toward the commander, Mitchell stepped closer. His attention focused entirely on the memorial tattoo. Sarah watched his face as his eyes traced the intricate details, her parents' names, their dates of service, the military ribbons, and the roses that intertwined through the design. What she saw in his expression wasn't the criticism or dismissal she had grown accustomed to. Instead, he looked genuinely moved. Michael Martinez, Staff Sergeant, United States Marine Corps, he read aloud. And Elena Martinez, Lieutenant Army Nurse Corps. Yes, sir, Sarah confirmed quietly. My parents. Commander Mitchell continued studying the tattoo, and Sarah noticed that his jaw had tightened slightly. When he looked up at her, there was something different in his eyes, a recognition that went beyond simple professional interest. Martinez, I served with your father. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Around them, the crowd seemed to fade away as she stared at the commander in shock. You what? Michael Martinez. Afghanistan, 2018. We were part of a joint operation. My SEAL team was working with his Marine unit on a series of missions in the Helmand province. Commander Mitchell's voice had taken on a different quality, softer and more personal. Your father saved my life. Sarah felt her knees go weak. She had heard stories about her father's service, but he had never been one to talk about specific missions or the people he had served with. He had always said that what happened overseas stayed overseas, and that the important thing was that he had made it home to his family. "I don't understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Commander Mitchell glanced around at the crowd that was still watching their every move. "This isn't really the place for this conversation. Would you be willing to step away from the crowd so we can talk privately?" Sarah nodded, still too stunned to fully process what was happening. She caught Jake's eye and gestured for him to follow as Commander Mitchell led them away from the main crowd to a quieter area near the edge of the fairgrounds. Once they were away from the prying eyes and ears, Commander Mitchell's formal demeanor relaxed slightly. "Your father never mentioned having a daughter named Sarah. He talked about his kids all the time," Sarah replied, finding her voice again. "Both of you. He was so proud of you and your brother. He carried pictures of you in his wallet and showed them to anyone who would look." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes. It was exactly something her father would have done. He had been endlessly proud of his children, always bragging about Sarah's work ethic and Jake's academic achievements to anyone who would listen. He used to say that his daughter was tougher than any Marine he had ever served with, Commander Mitchell continued, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "He said you had been taking care of everyone around you since you were old enough to walk and that you never complained about carrying more than your fair share." Jake moved closer to Sarah, his eyes wide with amazement.
"Sarah, did you know about any of this?" "No," she said, shaking her head.
"Dad never told us specific names or details about the people he served with." Commander Mitchell nodded understandingly. "That's not uncommon. A lot of veterans keep those memories separate from their family life. It's a way of protecting the people they love from the harsh realities of what we do." He paused for a moment, his expression becoming more serious. "Your father probably never told you about the day he saved my life either." Sarah shook her head again, hanging on his every word. "We were on a reconnaissance mission, gathering intelligence on enemy movements in a particularly dangerous area. Our convoy hit an improvised explosive device and several of us were injured. I was trapped under debris from our vehicle, unconscious and bleeding badly." Commander Mitchell's voice took on the measured tone of someone recounting a traumatic memory. "When I came to, your father was there. He had left his own position of safety to come back for me. He pulled me out of that wreckage under enemy fire, carried me to safety, and applied field medical training that kept me alive until the medevac helicopter could reach us." Her father had never told her about this. He had never told her about saving anyone's life or putting himself in danger for his fellow soldiers. "The doctors later said that if he had waited even 5 more minutes, I would have bled to death," Commander Mitchell continued. "Your father risked his own life to save mine, and he did it without hesitation. That's the kind of man he was. Someone who put others before himself, no matter the cost." The tears that Sarah had been fighting were now flowing freely down her cheeks. Jake had moved close enough to put his arm around her shoulders, his own eyes bright with unshed tears. "He never told us," Sarah said through her tears. "He never said anything about saving anyone." "That was Mike," Commander Mitchell said with a sad smile. "He was never one for bragging about his heroics, but I've never forgotten what he did for me, and I'd never stop being grateful." He paused, looking at Sarah with an expression that was part admiration, part sorrow. "When he was carrying me to safety, he kept talking about his kids. He said he had a daughter who was going to change the world and a son who was smart enough to be anything he wanted to be. He said his family was his motivation for everything he did." Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to compose herself. Around them, the sounds of the recruitment fair continued, but it felt like they were in their own private world. "After that mission, your father and I stayed in touch," Commander Mitchell continued. "We exchanged emails, holiday cards, that sort of thing. He told me when you graduated from college, when Jake started community college, about your mother's work at the hospital. He was so proud of both of you." "You knew about Mom too?" Jake asked. "I met Elena once, actually," Commander Mitchell replied. "She came to visit Mike during his recovery at the base hospital. She was everything he had described. Strong, compassionate, dedicated to helping others. They were a remarkable couple." Sarah felt a fresh wave of emotion wash over her. Her parents had been gone for 3 years now, and she still missed them every day. Hearing about them from someone who had known them in their professional capacity, who had seen them as the heroes they truly were, was both comforting and heartbreaking. "I was devastated when I heard about the accident," Commander Mitchell said softly. "Mike and Elena were good people, the kind of people who made the world better just by being in it. The three of them stood in comfortable silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Sarah felt overwhelmed by everything she had learned in the past few minutes. Her father, the man who had taught her to change her own oil and had never missed one of her softball games, had been a genuine hero who had saved lives under enemy fire. "Ms. Martinez," Commander Mitchell said finally, "I need to ask you something." "Yes, sir?" "Those people back there, the ones who were judging you based on your appearance, do you deal with that kind of thing often?" Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice to remain steady. "I thought so," he said with a grimace. "I've seen it happen to a lot of good people." Society tends to make snap judgments based on things like tattoos, piercings, clothing choices. But in the military, we learn pretty quickly that appearances can be deceiving. He gestured toward her tattoos. These tell a story of honor, service, and sacrifice. They show respect for family and an understanding of what it means to lose someone in service to others. Anyone who bothers to actually look at them instead of just seeing tattoos would understand that. Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest. For so long, she had felt like she had to justify her choices to people who had already made up their minds about her. Hearing validation from someone like Commander Mitchell, someone who had actually known her parents, meant more than she could express. "Your father used to say that the best Marines weren't always the ones who looked the part," Commander Mitchell continued. "He said the best ones were the ones who had something worth fighting for, and the courage to fight for it." He looked directly at Sarah. "From what I've observed today, and from what your father told me about you, I think you have both of those qualities." Sarah felt her cheeks flush.
"I'm not a Marine, sir."
"I'm just someone trying to get by and take care of my family." "Taking care of family is one of the most honorable things a person can do," Commander Mitchell replied. "And standing up for yourself and others the way you did back there takes courage." Jake, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke up. "Commander Mitchell, can I ask you something?"
"Of course. Do you think would someone like me have what it takes to be a SEAL?"
Commander Mitchell studied Jake carefully. Sarah could see him taking in her brother's slight build, his nervous energy, his eager but uncertain expression. "What do you think it takes to be a SEAL?" Commander Mitchell asked instead of answering directly. Jake thought for a moment. "Physical strength, mental toughness, the ability to work as part of a team, those are all important." Commander Mitchell agreed. "But they're not the most important things. The most important thing is having the right motivation. Why do you want to be a SEAL?" "I want to serve my country," Jake said immediately. "I want to make a difference, to help protect people who can't protect themselves." "Those are good reasons," Commander Mitchell said. "But they're pretty general. Let me ask you something more specific. What would you be willing to sacrifice to achieve that goal?" Jake glanced at Sarah before answering. "Everything. I know it would be difficult and dangerous. I know I might not make it through training, but I think it would be worth it to try." Commander Mitchell nodded slowly. "Your father asked me a similar question once when he was considering re-enlisting for a second tour. He said he knew the risks, but he felt like he had more to give." "What did you tell him?" Sarah asked. "I told him that the decision had to be his, but that if he chose to serve again, he would have my full support and respect." Commander Mitchell looked between Sarah and Jake. "The military isn't for everyone, and it certainly isn't a decision to be made lightly. But for the right people, it can be a way to honor the memory of those who served before them." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She knew what Jake was thinking. She could see it in his eyes. He was thinking about their father, about service and honor and following in his footsteps. Part of her was proud of his desire to serve, but another part of her was terrified at the thought of losing him too. "Jake," she said quietly, "this is a big decision. Maybe we should talk about it more when we get home." "Actually," Commander Mitchell interjected, "I have a suggestion, if you're both open to it." Brother and sister looked at him expectantly. "There's a SEAL training preparation program that runs for 6 months. It's designed to help potential candidates determine if they're really ready for the commitment, both physically and mentally. It's tough, but it's not as intense as actual SEAL training, and participants can withdraw at any time without penalty." He looked directly at Jake. "If you're serious about this, I would recommend starting there. It would give you a realistic idea of what you're getting into, and it would give your sister some time to get used to the idea." Sarah felt some of her panic subside. 6 months of preparation sounded much better than Jake immediately signing up for SEAL training. "Where is this program?" Jake asked eagerly. "There are several locations around the country. The closest one to you would probably be in San Antonio, about 4 hours from here." Jake's face fell slightly. "I couldn't do that. I can't leave Sarah to handle everything alone. Sarah looked at her brother in surprise. She had been so focused on her own fears about losing him that she hadn't considered that he might be worried about leaving her. Jake, she said softly, you can't put your life on hold for me forever. But you've sacrificed so much already, Jake protested. You worked 2 jobs to support us. You gave up your career plans to take care of me after Mom and Dad died. I can't just abandon you now. Commander Mitchell watched this exchange with interest. If I may offer another suggestion, Sarah, have you ever considered that there might be opportunities for you in the military as well? Sarah looked at him in surprise.
Me?
I'm 25 years old with no relevant training or experience. You have a degree in social work, correct? Yes, but I've never actually worked in the field. The jobs don't pay enough for me to support both of us. The military has a significant need for social workers and counselors, Commander Mitchell explained. Veterans returning from overseas often struggle with readjustment, PTSD, family issues. People who understand sacrifice and loss, who have experienced taking care of others under difficult circumstances, can be incredibly valuable in those roles. Sarah had never considered military service for herself. She had always thought of herself as the caregiver, the one who stayed home and kept things together, while others went out and served. I don't know, she said uncertainly. I've never thought of myself as military material. Your father would disagree with that assessment, Commander Mitchell said with a smile. He always said you had the heart of a warrior and the instincts of a protector. Those are exactly the qualities we look for. Sarah felt her world shifting in ways she hadn't expected when she woke up that morning. She had come to this recruitment fair simply to support her brother, and now she was being told that she might have opportunities she had never considered. Think about it, Commander Mitchell said. Both of you. There are programs that would allow you to serve together, at least initially. Jake could do his preparation training while Sarah explores options in social work or counseling. You could support each other through the process. He pulled 2 business cards from his pocket and handed one to each of them. Those have my direct contact information. If either of you decides you want to learn more, call me. I meant what I said about your father. I owe him my life, and I would be honored to help his children explore ways to serve if that's what they choose to do. Sarah stared down at the card in her hand, her mind racing with possibilities she had never imagined. Beside her, Jake was practically vibrating with excitement. Thank you, sir, Jake said. This means more than you know. Thank your father, Commander Mitchell replied. He's the one who taught me that the best way to honor someone's sacrifice is to live up to the example they set. As they walked back toward the main area of the recruitment fair, Sarah felt like she was seeing everything with new eyes. The booths and displays that had seemed foreign and intimidating earlier now looked like possibilities, doorways to a future she had never considered. The crowd from their earlier confrontation had largely dispersed, but Sarah noticed that several people were still watching her with curious expressions. She realized that word had probably spread about Commander Mitchell's interest in her tattoos and their subsequent private conversation. As they approached the main area, Sarah saw the 2 men who had made the judgmental comments earlier. They were standing near the Marine Corps booth, and when they spotted her, they both looked distinctly uncomfortable. The first man, the one wearing the veteran's cap, actually took a step in her direction. "Excuse me, miss," he said, his voice much more respectful than it had been earlier. "I wanted to apologize for what I said before. I was out of line." Sarah looked at him in surprise. "Thank you. That means a lot. I served in Vietnam," the man continued, "and I should know better than to judge someone without knowing their story. Your parents sound like they were good people."
They were,
Sarah replied simply. The man nodded and extended his hand. "Bob Patterson, gunnery sergeant, retired." "Sarah Martinez," she replied, shaking his hand. "If you do decide to serve," Gunnery Sergeant Patterson said, "you'll be carrying on a proud family tradition. The military needs more people like you, people who understand what service really means." As Patterson walked away, Sarah felt a sense of closure that she hadn't expected. The confrontation that had started so badly had somehow turned into something positive, something that had opened doors she hadn't known existed. 3 months after the recruitment fair, Sarah found herself standing in front of a mirror in a small apartment in San Antonio, adjusting the collar of her new military dress uniform. The reflection looking back at her was someone she barely recognized, confident, purposeful, and wearing the insignia of a United States Navy counselor candidate. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. After that pivotal conversation with Commander Mitchell, Both Sarah and Jake had spent weeks researching their options, talking through their fears and dreams, and ultimately making the decision to pursue military careers together. Jake had been accepted into the SEAL preparation program, while Sarah had qualified for an accelerated officer candidate program that would allow her to use her social work background in military family services. The apartment they now shared was smaller than their old place in Cedar Falls, but it felt like home in a way their old life never had. For the first time since their parents died, Sarah felt like she was moving forward instead of just surviving day to day. She was still taking care of Jake, but now he was taking care of her too, and they were both working towards something bigger than themselves. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Sarah, are you ready?" Jake called from the living room. "Commander Mitchell will be here any minute." Sarah took one last look in the mirror and smiled at her reflection. The woman looking back at her wore her tattoos with pride, no longer seeing them as something that set her apart, but as symbols of the strength and resilience that had brought her to this moment. Commander Mitchell had kept his promise to stay in touch, checking in with both siblings regularly as they navigated their new military careers. He had become something of a mentor to them, sharing stories about their father and offering guidance when they struggled with the challenges of military life. Today, he was taking them to a special ceremony that he said would help them understand more about their father's legacy. When Sarah opened the door, she was surprised to see Commander Mitchell in full dress uniform, his chest adorned with ribbons and medals that spoke of years of distinguished service. Standing next to him was a woman in army dress blues who looked to be about Sarah's age. "Sarah, Jake, I'd like you to meet Captain Lisa Chen," Commander Mitchell said. Lisa is a military psychologist who works with returning veterans and their families. Captain Chen stepped forward with a warm smile. "It's wonderful to meet you both. Commander Mitchell has told me so much about your family." As they drove across San Antonio to their destination, Captain Chen explained more about her work. "I specialize in helping veterans process trauma and reconnect with their families after deployment. It's challenging work, but incredibly rewarding. Many of the skills that make someone a good civilian social worker translate perfectly to military family services." Sarah found herself fascinated by Captain Chen's description of her duties. It sounded exactly like the kind of work she had always dreamed of doing, helping people navigate difficult transitions and rebuild their lives after trauma. "The military is finally recognizing that emotional and psychological support is just as important as medical treatment," Captain Chen continued. "We're building new programs all the time, and we need people who understand both the civilian and military perspectives." Their destination turned out to be a memorial garden on the grounds of a military hospital. As they walked through the carefully maintained paths lined with plaques and monuments, Commander Mitchell led them to a specific section dedicated to fallen service members from recent conflicts. "I wanted to show you something," he said, stopping in front of a black granite wall inscribed with hundreds of names. "Your father's name is here, along with your mother's." Sarah and Jake stepped closer to the wall, searching for their parents' names among the long list of service members. When they found them, etched in clean, precise letters, Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. Staff Sergeant Michael Martinez, United States Marine Corps. Lieutenant Elena Martinez, Army Nurse Corps. Jake read aloud. Killed in automobile accident while responding to emergency call. September 15th, 2021. Sarah traced her finger over her parents' names, thinking about the circumstances that had led to their deaths. They had been driving to the hospital where her mother worked when they received a call about a multi-car accident involving several families. Both had insisted on responding, even though it was their night off. The drunk driver who hit them head-on had walked away without a scratch. "They died doing what they always did," Commander Mitchell said quietly, "putting others before themselves." As they stood in front of the memorial, other visitors came and went. Sarah noticed that many of them were wearing military uniforms, but others were clearly civilians, family members and friends paying their respects to loved ones. She watched as people traced names with their fingers, left flowers, or simply stood in silent reflection. "Sarah," Commander Mitchell said after a while, "there's something else I want to show you." He led them to a nearby bench where several photo albums were displayed under protective glass. The albums contained pictures from various military ceremonies and events, and Commander Mitchell flipped through the pages until he found what he was looking for. "This was taken about 6 months before your father's final deployment," he said, pointing to a photograph of a group of Marines in dress uniform. Sarah leaned closer to examine the photo. Her father was standing in the back row, his familiar smile bright against his tanned face. He looked young and proud, and completely unaware that he would be dead within 2 years. "He'd talked about you and Jake constantly," Commander Mitchell said. "He showed this picture to everyone he met, told them all about his smart daughter who was going to change the world, and his brilliant son who could be anything he wanted to be." Jake moved closer to Sarah and put his arm around her shoulders. "He was right about both of those things," he said softly. As they walked back toward the parking area, Captain Chen fell into step beside Sarah. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. How do you feel about the path you've chosen? Any second thoughts?" Sarah considered the question carefully. The past 3 months had been challenging in ways she hadn't expected. Military life required a level of discipline and structure that was very different from her previous existence. There were rules to follow, hierarchies to respect, and a constant pressure to perform at the highest level. But there were also rewards she hadn't anticipated. For the first time in her adult life, she felt like she was part of something larger than herself. Her work with military families had shown her that she could make a real difference in people's lives, helping them navigate the unique challenges of military service and family separation. "No second thoughts," Sarah said finally. "It's been hard, but it's been worth it. I feel like I'm finally doing what I'm supposed to be doing. What about the judgment from others? Do you still face that because of your tattoos?" Sarah smiled. "Occasionally, but it's different now. When people see me in uniform, they see a service member first. The tattoos are just part of who I am, and most people in the military understand that everyone has their own story." Captain Chen nodded. "I found that the military can be surprisingly progressive in some ways. Performance and character matter more than appearance or background." As they reached the parking area, Commander Mitchell turned to address both siblings. "I have one more thing to share with you, and then I have a proposition." He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket and handed it to Sarah. "This arrived at my office last week." Sarah opened the envelope and unfolded a formal letter on military letterhead. As she read, her eyes widened in surprise. "What is it?" Jake asked. "It's a commendation," Sarah said in amazement. "A posthumous commendation for Dad, recognizing his actions in Afghanistan." "Read it aloud," Commander Mitchell encouraged. Sarah cleared her throat and began to read. "Staff Sergeant Michael Martinez is hereby recognized for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against an enemy of the United States. On the date in question, Staff Sergeant Martinez displayed exceptional courage under fire when he voluntarily exposed himself to enemy fire to rescue a wounded comrade. His selfless actions and unwavering dedication to his fellow service members exemplify the highest traditions of military service." Sarah's voice broke slightly as she continued reading. "Staff Sergeant Martinez's heroic actions saved the life of a fellow service member and demonstrated the kind of courage and selflessness that makes the United States military the finest fighting force in the world." When she finished reading, Jake was wiping tears from his eyes, and even Captain Chen looked moved. "This will be presented to your family at a formal ceremony next month," Commander Mitchell said. "But that's not the only reason I wanted to share this with you." He paused, looking between Sarah and Jake with an expression that was part pride, part anticipation. "The ceremony is going to be held at the Naval Special Warfare Training Center. It's where SEAL candidates go through their final phases of training. Jake, if you continue to excel in your preparation program the way you have been, you'll be invited to attend SEAL training there in 6 months." Jake's face lit up with excitement, but Sarah felt a familiar knot of worry form in her stomach. "And Sarah," Commander Mitchell continued, "I've been talking with Captain Chen and some other people about your work with military families. There's a new program being developed that would place specially trained social workers at training facilities to provide support for both candidates and their families during the most stressful phases of military training." Sarah looked at him in confusion. "I don't understand." "They want you to consider being part of the team that supports SEAL candidates and their families during training," Captain Chen explained. "You would be working with people who are going through some of the most challenging experiences of their lives, helping them maintain their emotional and psychological health during extreme stress. It would mean you could be near Jake during his training," Commander Mitchell added. "You could support him while also using your skills to help other military families." Sarah stared at them both, hardly believing what she was hearing. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious," Captain Chen confirmed. "Your combination of education, life experience, and personal understanding of military families makes you an ideal candidate. Plus, your tattoos actually work in your favor. They show that you understand the importance of honoring family and overcoming adversity. Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes for the second time that day. 6 months ago, she had been a waitress working 2 jobs and struggling to make ends meet while people judged her based on her appearance. Now she was being offered the opportunity to serve her country while doing meaningful work that could impact the lives of countless military families. "There's one more thing," Commander Mitchell said with a slight smile. "The program is being pilot tested at several facilities around the country. If it's successful, it could be expanded nationwide. You would essentially be helping to build something that could change how the military approaches family support during training." Sarah looked at Jake, who was practically bouncing with excitement. "Sarah, this is perfect. We could serve together just like Mom and Dad did." The mention of their parents brought everything full circle for Sarah. She thought about the memorial wall they had just visited, about the posthumous commendation for her father's heroism, about the path that had led them from that recruitment fair to this moment. "What would I need to do?" Sarah asked. "Complete your current program, which you're already excelling at," Captain Chen replied. "Then do an additional 6 months of specialized training in military psychology and family counseling. After that, you would be assigned to your first duty station. And if Jake qualifies for SEAL training, we could potentially be at the same facility." "It's very likely," Commander Mitchell confirmed. "The timing would work out perfectly." Sarah took a deep breath, thinking about the decision she was about to make. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, about to jump into the unknown. But it also felt right in a way that few things in her life ever had. "I'll do it," she said finally. Jake let out a whoop of excitement and swept her into a hug that lifted her off her feet. "Sarah, this is going to be amazing. We're going to serve together, help people together, honor Mom and Dad together." As they drove back to their apartment that evening, Sarah reflected on how much her life had changed. The woman who had been mocked and judged at a small-town recruitment fair was gone, replaced by someone who was confident in her abilities and proud of her choices. Her tattoos were still there, still telling the same stories of loss and resilience and family honor. But now they were part of a larger story, one that included service and purpose and the chance to make a real difference in the world. That night, as she prepared for bed, Sarah looked at herself in the bathroom mirror one more time. Tomorrow, she would begin the next phase of her training, moving one step closer to the career she had never imagined but now couldn't envision living without. She traced the outline of the phoenix on her right arm, thinking about the symbolism of rising from ashes. Her parents were gone, and that loss would always be part of her story. But from that tragedy had come something beautiful, a chance to serve, to honor their memory, and to help other families navigate the challenges of military life. As she turned off the light and headed to bed, Sarah felt a sense of peace that had been missing from her life for years. She was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. And tomorrow, she would wake up ready to continue building the life her parents had always known she was capable of living. The last thing she saw before closing her eyes was the business card Commander Mitchell had given her at the recruitment fair, now framed and hanging on her bedroom wall. Below it was a photo of her parents in their military uniforms, their faces bright with the same sense of purpose and pride that Sarah now carried with her every day. She had found her place in the world, and it was everything her father had said it would be. An opportunity to serve others, to make a difference, and to prove that strength comes not from how others see you, but from knowing who you truly are and having the courage to live up to that truth every single day.